Hi, I'm horror author Paul Edwards. Tonight I'm watching The Rig from 2010. They taught us once at a writing seminar that a great way to pitch a story is to say that it's like something familiar, except that it's, and then you put a qualifier. For example, if you want to describe the Steven Seagal movie Under Siege, you say it's Die Hard on a ship. So using that technique, it's real easy to describe The Rig. The Rig is Alien, the 1979 Ridley Scott movie, Alien on an oil rig. That's what it is. It's Alien on an oil rig. You can pretty much tell everything you need to know about the movie from that description. There's a stock supply of cannon fodder people who you know are not going to survive to the end of the picture, working on this oil rig. And they've dug in the wrong place and they've stirred up sea monsters, which, although they live at the bottom of the ocean, for some reason are amphibious and can survive in the air environment aboard the rig. And one by one, they knock off crew members. At first, nobody knows they're there, but within a reasonable amount of time, people discover we're infested with monsters, we have to start fighting back. And they do make some attempts. And it pretty much follows the story of Alien, just with CGI special effects from 2010 instead of the awesome practical effects from 1979. One thing that really stands out in the movie is this. There are a couple of scenes where a character is just sitting there doing something ordinary, and all of a sudden, a claw rips through them and kills them, and there's a spray of blood. So you were bored for a minute, and then you were shocked for a moment. This really is not the way to do that kind of scene. Alfred Hitchcock described years ago the way that you handle something like this. Okay. Suppose that you have a scene where two men walk into an office room and they sit down at a desk and they talk about baseball for 5 minutes. Suddenly a bomb goes off under the desk. You had 5 boring minutes of movie and 1 moment of shock. The way to improve it is you show the audience right up front that there's a bomb under the desk ticking away. Then you have the two men come into the room, have the same conversation about baseball, and you've got 5 minutes of suspense. The way that they could have done these scenes so easily in The Rig would be to show us that the monster is there in the room, like clinging to the ceiling or behind the desk or something. Then have the character come into the room and start doing ordinary things, going through papers or whatever. And you'll be feeling suspense the whole time because, oh no, the monster is going to get him. I just know the monster is going to get him. And then probably the monster does get him, or you could surprise your audience and have the guy successfully leave the room without getting attacked. But either way, you've had suspense during that whole scene. The way to do it is not to just show people doing ordinary things and then suddenly shock the audience with 1 moment of monster attack. So they really blew it, and they did this a couple of times in this movie where they so easily could have done a good suspenseful scene if only they had worked it just a little bit differently. Another thing that this reminds me of in this film is there are a few things that are built into this story that are doing half the work for you. The main thing is they're on an oil rig out at sea. So they've already isolated their protagonist. And that's a basic trick in horror or suspense, is to isolate your protagonists. If you're in trouble walking down the sidewalk in Times Square, there's a million people around you. You want your characters to be isolated in some way. They can be physically isolated, or they can be isolated in some more creative way, but you have to have them separated from any possible help. So doing a story like this, where the action is all set on an oil rig, like a third of the story is already written for you. The premise does the work for you. You're way out at sea. Help is hours away, and that's even if they get your radio broadcast. You've got a good setup there. And you don't have to explain the monsters. People fall into this trap a lot too, I've noticed. You don't have to give a plausible explanation for every single monster that comes up in every single book or movie. It's a monster story. We get it. There's going to be a monster. You don't have to explain the origin of the monster every single time. You dug in the wrong place in the ocean. Some violent, dangerous organism that nobody knew was there has been stirred up and now is coming to get you. That's it. We don't need, a pseudo-scientific explanation for it. I think it was good that they didn't bother to do that in this film. And there are enough ocean horror films where they do try to give some sort of convoluted explanation for the sea monster. It's the ocean. It's a sea monster. We get it. By the way, bases under siege are an excellent setup for horror. And this is basically what this is. It's a base under siege, except, it's a commercial base, not a military base. But it's the same premise. It's a base under siege. Those kind of stories work really well for ocean set monsters when you have like a near future undersea base that's being besieged by monsters. A great example of this was that Kristen Stewart movie, Underwater. They did that really well, the base under siege setup. And there have been some others too. Leviathan was a good example of it from the late 80s. Leviathan did a good base under siege setup in the ocean. So the premise of this movie was a solid monster premise. They really didn't execute the monster scares nearly as well as they could have. They so easily, with a minimal amount of work, could have made these scenes much more suspenseful. So I would give this movie a C on a monster goodness scale. You do get monsters, and the setup is fine. They just could have done so much more with what they had. Listen, if you're a fan of classic monsters and vintage horror, check out my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I'm self-published on Amazon. I write books for people who like monster movies. My name again is Paul Edwards. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. Thanks for letting me talk to you some about The Rig. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.